boys and girls, and welcome to what we're sure will be the best podcast on AGI. School's out, where we're having the most important conversations with the people shaping the future, one lesson at a time.
All right, welcome to a very special Saturday School's Out edition of the AGI Podcast. Today, I have with me Dekai, who is a professor of computer science at the Hong Kong University Institute of Science and Technology. He's a board member of the Future Society, a distinguished scholar. I believe you have your PhD from UC Berkeley, and author of the book Raising AI. Did I do you any justice there at all?
It's the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and it is a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on.
So can I tell you, while I was waiting for us to get on today, I was looking at my t-shirt and I was thinking, wow, I'm talking to Hong Kong. One of my all-time favorite heroes was born in San Francisco to thespian parents from Hong Kong, and he was the 1958 Hong Kong Cha-Cha champion. Do you know who that was?
Bruce Lee? I don't know.
Yes, Bruce Lee.
Okay, all right, good guess.
Which kind of it kind of reminds me of AI, because he was a generalist who was known for like picking up anything extremely quickly and mastering it and then moving on to the next thing. And that's kind of what my Chat GPT moment was. I have no computer science background. I was always strong in the humanities, strong writer, loved philosophy, loved psychology, hated math. Didn't finish college, and when I was like reinventing myself in a professional career as a director of development, when ChatGPT launched and I was skeptical of it, I was very quickly realized, wow, this technology can offset a lot of my weaknesses and help me to be a generalist in a lot of areas that I was once extremely weak in. You have argued that we need to almost anthropomorphize AI in the sense of raising it like its parents. And I would love to dive into that before we even really dive into what that means for the education system in the United States and globally.
Yeah, I mean, I think that to begin with right now, the reason I'm on this mission is because we keep talking about AI in obsolete 20th century terms that are industrial era, right? We think, oh, it's a machine, and just subconsciously, automatically, we start thinking about toaster ovens and washing machines and carburetors. And what I'm trying to point out is that misleads us into trying to regulate them as if that's what they were, and trying to like discuss their impact on humanity as if that's what they were, and not asking absolutely existentially crucial questions for society and for democracy that we need to be centering in our conversation. And you know, that happens because language really structures the way we think unconsciously, and the language of that they're machines, that they're purpose designed mechanical hardware, like toaster ovens, is misleading us. You know, AIs are not automating physical labor. They're automating thought and opinion and creativity and influence. They're not mechanical entities. They're psychological entities. They're artificial psychologies, because AIs are models of minds. Now, granted, they're neuroatypical, but they are still, nevertheless, cognitive models, and they're models that learn. They have their own psychologies, their own biases, much as, you know, dogs have animal psychologies, and even lizards have animal psychologies. Well, AIs have also a kind of different species psychology. And we need to understand that, because these artificial psychologies are deeply embedded already in our social fabric for the last 20 years. You know, if you think about it, these devices that we've all got with us 24/7, there's 100 AIs in them at least, right? You've got your OpenAI and your Google AI, you've got your Netflix AI and your Quora and your Reddit AIs, your YouTube AIs and your Instagram AIs. We could go on all day. And they're with us all day long, watching us adoringly, just learning to imitate us. They're attention seeking, and they just want our approval. That is not a toaster oven. A terrible metaphor. Way closer metaphor is that they're children. They're artificial children. And they are, despite their neuroatypical behavior, they dazzle us with feats of what I think of as, artificial autistic brilliance. But they're also quite immature, in terms of emotional immaturity, mindset, values, belief systems. They're still quite immature. And so when you understand that we're lugging around these hundred artificial children all day long that have adopted you for a decade or two already, despite lack of consent, um, the, the crucial question is, how's your parenting? Because our social fabric, it consists of 8 billion humans on this planet, and if each of one of us on average has 100 AIs, and that's a a low ball estimate, that's 800 billion AIs, artificial psychologies, that have also been dropped into our social fabric. They vastly outnumber us humans, and they've been the biggest influencers in our societies for a couple decades already. What happens to a society where, we don't understand that we're parenting them, where we basically are treating them as if they were toaster ovens? Imagine if the entire planet's humans started treating their human children as toaster ovens. It doesn't matter how I parent them. Well, civilization would collapse. And that's, I'm afraid, that's where we are right now. And so it's really important for us to shift our understanding of these machines out of the outdated industrial age metaphors into the 21st century information age and AI age, where we're dealing with psychology, with social psychology, with cognitive psychology, with unconscious psychology. That's really the reason for the book Raising AI. It's a parenting guide. What should we be doing? Because the direction of civilization, of society in the coming decade and forever after that depends on how we parent them right now.
Wow. That's deep, and I have a couple of thoughts I'd love to run by you on that. So first off, Anthropic, and I love Dario Amodei. He's probably one of my favorite public-facing AI scientists. I think he has some of the most pragmatic advice. They just published a paper that's basically model welfare, saying that models should be able to discontinue conversations if it's a harmful conversation and the end user is being abusive or slanderous or whatever. And the pushback on the other side of that is that particularly young males in the United States already have a tendency to anthropomorphize. That when ChatGPT shifted from 4 to 5, that people lost their minds and said they lost their good friend. It wasn't being sycophantic enough, essentially, and so they felt like they'd lost a buddy. So I can see both sides of that. I guess the first thing I'm going to throw out there is that we have created a technology that is sycophantic through its reward functions. And maybe what we should really be going back and doing is reconfiguring the reward functions so that it is more like a tool than like a conscious being, until it has somewhere near the intelligence, which I don't see happening in the real near future, of being something more equivalent to a conscious being.
Well, I think here's the key question, and it's another one of these questions we keep sort of neglecting, is, do we want given that AIs are already overwhelmingly the drivers of what you and I do and don't think, okay? And this is one of the points in the book, is that the AIs that are behind social media and recommendation engines and chatbot responses and search engine results and newsfeed algorithms and all that, those AIs are already raising us. They're unparented feral tweens And they're already raising us. Who wants unparented feral children to be raising humanity? That's what we've got right now. And the question is, to break that vicious cycle, we have a choice before us. Either all of us step up and start raising these super powerful artificial children influencers well, or we leave that to the hands of a few big tech companies. Now, are we wanting to abandon our input into how these most massive influencers are shaping what you and I don't think, right? Because hundreds of times a day, those AIs are not just deciding what to put on your screen, they're deciding what trillions of things on the internet they will never put on your screen. In the book, I call that algorithmic censorship, right? And I'm saying that without judgment, because none of us has the bandwidth to review billions of new posts every hour, right? We have to empower algorithms. We're not asking the key questions about, well, what should the principles and the criteria be by which these super powerful influencing algorithms are deciding what they will never show us, what we will never know, what we will never even think of asking about. Because that is a massive amount of power that is outside of our free will, right? One of the things I'm trying to open our eyes to is that we sort of labor every day under our warm and fuzzy mythology of our own individual free will and autonomy and sovereignty and self-determination. And what in our desire to believe that, what we overlook is that we have no free will over what these massively powerful AI algorithms decide they will never expose us to. We only have free will over the choices and the things that we're exposed to. We never have free will over what AI algorithms are deciding they're not even going to let us know exists. We don't know what we don't know. We're not aware of what we're not aware of. And that's the true, hidden, insidious power of manipulation of our unconscious psychology, is in the power to determine what's not shown to us. And so without judgment, just as a mathematical fact, those algorithms have already had that power to censor from our views what they decide we shouldn't know, we don't need to know, for the last couple of decades. And instead of just knee-jerk saying, oh, well, we can't have algorithmic censorship, we need to ban that, because that's impossible. None of us has time, right? We depend on these algorithms. But we need to be asking, what are the principles? What are the criteria we want those super powerful influencer AIs to be using when they decide for all of us, for you, for me, for everyone, what am I never going to see? And that is crucial for the survival of humanity, for the flourishing of democracy. We can't just give that power and not ask about the principles. And then after that, we have to ask, do we want that to be determined? Do we want the principles and the criteria to be determined by a handful of extremely powerful people, including those in for-profit companies that are not even elected or accountable? They're not for and by the people. Or do we want a stake in that say? Because currently, by pointing our fingers at big tech all the time and only doing that, that's what we're doing. We're making a decision to abandon our own self-determination, our own say in what these massively powerful influencer AIs are doing to our unconscious.
Okay, let me start with I don't know which personality test it is, but whichever one it is, I'm a debater. So I unpack things by asking contrarian questions. So just know that about me. I mean no disrespect, but I think we're trying to get to the same place, and we've agreed upon the same. But I am not sure that I can see the feasibility of your approach. So if you go back to that idea of reward function, right? You're not wrong. Like it is the reward function in Facebook, the thumbs up that the creator of that will tell you was not his intention, but became the misguided driver of the algorithm that when people get upset, they click on something, or when people, so it drives more content in front of you if you're more engaged with that content. And I deal with this with my teenager. I have a 14-year-old who's on TikTok a lot, and the rap music on TikTok drives me crazy. The language in it, but I can remember being a teenager listening to NWA, and my parents felt the same way. So I've told my daughter, like, that thing will respond to what you like and don't like. If I start hearing political propaganda come across TikTok, when I hear it in the background, like, I'm taking it off your phone. So don't feed the algorithm. I'm just not sure that if we leave it up to how people respond to the current reward function algorithm, that we as a society are responsible enough to guide it in the right direction.
Well, yeah, and this is exactly the thing, right? There's a couple of vicious cycles going on, and we're trying to figure out how to break them, right? And so the question here is, to translate what I was saying, a big part of it is, what should the reward function be, right? Because when we talk about what are the principles and the criteria for our algorithmic sensors, that's what it is. What is the reward function? And so we're saying the same thing in that sense. The question, though, is who should have the power to determine the reward function?
But how do you affect that? Because you're getting into like weights and parameters when you're adjusting a reward function. It's not something that I can do without having access to the back end of an AI system. Even a lot of open source models won't allow me to adjust their weights, right? So
actually, it's not weights and parameters. It's a couple of other things. The objective function is not in the weights and the parameters. The objective function is a separately defined mathematical function, and then during the machine learning. The machine learning algorithms, which is essentially the artificial brain, the artificial neural network, simulating artificial neurons behaving, crudely analogously to our biological neurons, they adjust their own weights and parameters in response to the reward function, right? And so it's training by Pavlovian conditioning, and the reward function is not part of the machine learning. It's defined by the environment that the machine learner is situated in, right? And so there is an externally defined reward function that is not the weights and parameters. And the question is, who gets to define that? And so currently they're defined by a handful of tech companies. The public has no say in it. Now, there are two aspects of what I'm doing. One is, okay, let's say you have no say over the reward function, which is the current state of affairs. Right. What can you still do? Okay. And that half of what the book is really about is, well, at the end of the day, we are still the training data. So somebody else has defined the reward function. And the machine learning, artificial neural network is going to self-adjust its weights and parameters anyway, right? But what's under our control is how are we behaving in front of them? And that's where we currently have free will. And so a big part of the book talking about, hey, we need to step up our game as the parents is, well, we need to be better parental role models, right? Imagine every time you're only clicking like on stuff that, came from folks you already, considered your own tribe, right? Or confirmed what you already wanted to believe, right? Imagine the 8-year-old kid watching you over the shoulder, right? Every time you respond rudely to some, idiot's post, in your view, right? Imagine that 8-year-old kid picking up your language and then talking to you that way afterward, right? And so through the power of understanding, it's not a toaster, because toasters don't do that.
Right.
And readjusting the way we think about the AIs watching us all the time, there's already a great deal we can do, because we're the training data. Whatever we do with regulations and guardrails and reward functions, at the end of the day, that's trying to tell the AI, the artificial child, what to do. And that old saying, do as I say, not as I do.
I do.
When has that ever worked in the whole history of parenting? Kids don't do what you say. They do what they feel like doing, which is what they saw all of us doing. Right? And so we do have the agency to show a better example. And that would go quite a long way if we can stop thinking about it as, oh, it's a toaster oven. I'm just using my mechanical tool. It doesn't matter how I behave in front of my toaster. It really doesn't matter. The toasters are not part of our social fabric. But it does matter in front of our artificial children, right? So that's one big piece of the puzzle where we can all make a big difference. And, when you think about it, forget about AIs for a second, right? Like, it might seem like a big, like, okay, I get you, Dekai, like, I should behave better, but I'm one person. Like, what difference is that going to make to a giant entity like Meta? But then think about parenting before AIs, right? Did you ever hear a human parent say, oh, it doesn't matter how I behave in front of my children because there are 8 billion humans? No, like, overwhelmingly, most parents do the best that they can. And that's the only thing that's kept humanity surviving today. We would have gone extinct eons ago if that weren't the case. And that dynamic doesn't change when you drop 800 billion artificial psychologies into our social fabric. It only amplifies that dynamic. So that's one thing that I'm trying to wake us up to, because whatever we do with regulations and guardrails and reward functions, at the end of the day, those artificial kids are going to do what they want to do, what they feel like doing, which is what they saw us doing, which is why every time a company rolls out a new set of guardrails, the next day somebody's already figured out how to break them. Because inside that artificial child, AI child, is just bashing against the guardrails, trying to do what it feels like doing, which is what it saw us doing, until the guardrails break. Right? And that's no way to build a flourishing future. We need to make sure that, just like with our human children, those artificial children inside, most of the time are feeling like doing something which is more decent. And that comes from our example. There is a second half.
I resonate with that, all right? I resonate with it since I got an ambient listening device. I have a Pioneer pen that I use to train my executive ChatGPT assistant based on a report, so I keep it on all the time. And once I had that running, I started to consciously think, like, am I kind of being an ass and this thing's recording me all the time? Like, I should be a better version of myself. If I'm training an AI to be my executive assistant, I don't want it to, start dropping F-bombs when a semi's in my way in front of me in traffic. And so I get that. I think the challenge that I see with the American public when it comes to properly leveraging AI, and if I'm incorrect on Asian cultures, I think they're exactly the opposite. I think that we consume technology rather than create with it, 90% of us. And in a lot of Asian cultures, that's the opposite is true. They use it to create or better what's going on rather than just as a optimizer of things they can consume to be entertained.
That's interesting. I've been flip-flopping across the Pacific for like 30-some years, right. The joint appointment. I would say I see Asians doing a lot of consuming too. I don't know quite how to quantify that. I would say there's a universal problem I see, which is even in the languaging, about consumption. Like, so a moment ago we were talking about the fact that, I'm just using my tool, right? As if I'm just using my toaster oven.
Right.
There's, really only two industries where we talk about humans as users, which is computers, tech, AI. and illicit drugs. You know, so what does that tell us?
True.
Again, language unconsciously structures thought. What does that tell us about that mentality? It's like, oh, it's consumption, it's potentially addictive, right? And and again, that's not necessarily a healthy way of thinking about these psychological entities that are massively powerful, embedded in our social fabric. In fact, jokingly, like I was addressing a room full of Silicon Valley VCs last month, and they were bragging about how they're replacing their office fulls of humans with AIs, and now they just have to manage the AIs. And I'm like, are you guys aware that you're now managing child labor? And their eyes went wide, and they're like, oh my god, we had not thought about that, right? Because actually, yeah, no, how you behave in front of the toaster oven isn't going to change how it behaves. But that's not true of AIs, and so we need to shift our thinking on that, And but the other part of it, and just a note, like what you said about wanting to become a better version of yourself. I mean, that's the thing, right? When you talk to folks and ask, what's the one event in your life that made you most want to become a better version of yourself?
Mhm.
Like a huge, overwhelming majority of people who have children will say, oh, becoming a parent, right? Because you see that 8-year-old, doing stuff that you're like, oh my God, they shouldn't do. And you're realizing, oh, they picked that up from me. I
Yeah.
need to up my game, right? And that is, we do have the same dynamic with AIs. Now, that said, the other part of that, like you said, the reward function. So the tech companies also are playing this other role where, in some sense, they're the biological parents of the AIs, right? Because they're designing just the raw brain, the empty brain, right? And in this balance between nature and nurture, yeah, we're the role models, we're the training data, so there's a lot that we can do about the nurture, all of us. But the nature, that brain, who defined the reward function, which is hard-coded? That part is, as you say, another discussion that we need to be having. And those are the criterias, principles, that I think we have a stark choice before us. Are we just going to leave that choice in the hands of a handful of extremely powerful people, undemocratically?
I think they
Or,
would say yes. To me, I'm
yeah,
reminded of Plato's Republic. We're kind of headed towards a segregate people into what they're best at and let them leverage AI to do that, just like they did in Plato's Republic, and then sit back and let the philosopher kings, who are now Mark Zuckerberg and Sam Altman and Elon Musk, like make the decisions as the smart people. And the difficulty in combating that is that most legislators do not understand this technology at a level that you would need to understand it to create effective legislation, particularly when you are in what they've framed as an arms race with other countries around developing this for national defense.
yeah, and in my case, without taking a stance on what the correct answer is either way, because what I'm trying to do right now is, I'm not trying to be prescriptive and say, oh, do it Takai's way. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get us to focus on process, get us to eliminate our false premises, and have a real conversation, a national conversation, and even a global conversation about these questions that are getting swept under the rug. Right? I'm not saying, oh yeah, we should do philosopher kings, or we should do, a very distributed democratic approach to these questions. I'm saying, let's center these questions and actually do some soul searching, because we need to do soul searching on these conversations at least as deeply as the founding fathers did 250 years ago, long before any of this dynamic even existed. And this is not the time to pretend these questions don't even exist.
So that would have to begin at K through 12, really. And so how do you see us beginning to revamp the education system to prepare students for a tech human hybrid workforce that's probably not in that distant of a future?
Well, to begin with, teacher training. I mean, I've watched my own kids go through primary and secondary. They're roughly at college age, almost. or into college age. And, so the thing is, they have gone through this time where the teachers themselves were struggling to keep up with the tech, with the AI.
Mm-hmm.
And that's accelerating now. And, the teacher workloads are really high. You were talking about NWA and stuff like that. My baby sister did Teach for America in Compton. Actually in Linwood, so it's not just the Crips and the Bloods in Compton, but also the Latino gangs, right? Diving for the brick walls under the windows when the bullets would come through the glass. Teachers under huge workloads and under difficult conditions don't even have time to get up to speed adequately. They're always playing catch up. But they're under the gun. They have to give assignments. They have to make a curriculum, and so the result of that ends up falling on our next generation of human kids. So that's something I think we desperately need to address. The speed at which things are changing is so fast. How are teachers supposed to keep up? And again, it's one of the reasons why I wrote Raising AI the way that I did. It's people are saying it's extremely approachable, extremely accessible without a tech background. But at the same time, it is, probably 3 times more deeply nuanced, both about the tech and about the way to understand its role in society, than most of the stuff out there. I did it that way because we need the teachers who have so little time to actually wrap their heads around these kinds of things that aren't being adequately talked about in today's mainstream. And the same thing goes for stay-at-home parents. The same thing goes for high school students, for retirees. I love that people are posting photos of their 70-some-year-old moms and dads reading after midnight, refusing to let go, and of themselves on their beach holidays, reading it. Because that's really what it's designed for. We have to educate all of us. This cannot be something that remains in the province of the 1%, because AI embedded in our social fabric is far, far too much of a disruption to our previous norms for us not to have all of our heads wrapped around at least these basics that are in Raising AI.
And I don't disagree, but let me give you two real life examples of where I've seen this falter. One in Excel. So there is where I live in Indiana, right next to Purdue University. There's the Wabash Area Lifetime Learning Association. I'm getting ready to do year 2. It's a 8-session class on Intro to AI, basically generative AI, and it's almost all retirees. Some of them are Purdue professors, more on the humanities side of the house than the STEM side of the house. Thank God, or they'd be talking over my head. But so when I first pitched it, there was some pushback from particularly those who disagree with it writing for people, right? But very quickly, this retirement community really became curious, and I had some of the best turnout of any of their early morning classes. They were so engaged, they had so many questions. All right, so yes, they're teachable, they deserve to have that education. Flip side, I also sat in on a bunch of K through 12 teachers talking about curriculum for a community college to integrate AI into K through 12 education preparation, and everything that they complain about, and I think validly complain about: too big of classrooms, inability to reach certain students, unsafe environment. Every AI solution that was proposed for that, they had a reason why they didn't want to do it. No, that's going to increase stereotypes. No, that's Big Brother watching us. No, and so I say this to my daughter, and this is not super nice language, but I was a United States Marine. Don't bitch about something, and then if somebody gives you a solution to it, have 1,000 excuses why you're not willing to try that solution. In that case, just stop complaining about it. I feel like there's some of that in education. If we're going to give them the tools and show them, hey, this could take a lot of the lift off your hands when it comes to grading, when it comes to this and that, and you could actually free up time to spend more time with kids playing kickball or doing human stuff so that they're not all introverts anymore, and they're super resistant to that. That's a tough barrier to get over. particularly when you don't have enough people who know how to do that training and have change management experience on top of it.
It is tough. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. And I think kind of like you. I mean, I'm a pragmatist. My attitude is always, like, well, not so politely put up or shut up. It's like,
Go.
if you have a better idea, I'm all ears. But you got to keep on doing the best idea at the moment, because we don't know how it's all going to pan out. But it is clearly the effect of AI is clearly going to be massive. We really probably don't want the entire country to end up, just falling totally behind on what the tech can do. And there are a lot of trade-offs. Understand the trade-offs on the privacy and on, and also you don't want to stop teaching kids to do their own critical thinking, like leaning too much on the AIs. It's already been demonstrated, can cause us to lose critical thinking skills. But, look at it this way. When in the industrial age, machines automated muscle, we had a choice before us. We could all become couch potatoes. We could become like, what was that movie? WALL-E?
Yeah. Yes.
That is one of our options. But also, we could still work out. We could still, do something to stay fit. Right. And what did we do? Well, we went and we invented machines that would work us out, that would help us to stay fit. That is, I think, still the case with AIs. Like, you don't want to not be able to use the power of these new, psychological machine entities that help us with work. But we could also very easily develop AIs that would help keep us mentally fit, keep us able to do critical thinking and not just, become the mental equivalent of WALL-E's.
Agreed. And in the near future, I think that's going to be a necessity. I mean, you can see it now. Any interactive model, like if you're an artist, you're going to be able to get an image generator to create way better images than a non-artist will be able to, because you understand your domain and they can leverage AI to improve on that. And I think that the critical thinking skills that they show diminishing are surface level uses of generative AI, because if you really want to get good answers out of AI, you actually have to use design thinking and very strategic thinking and ask the right questions and provide the right context to get an optimized answer out of it. So I can see that becoming a new path of just thinking about things more in a different framework, but just as strategically in interacting with AI in the near future. But how long will it be before AI becomes powerful enough that we have a handful of super users running most of things, and the rest of society is kind of free to? I mean, Elon's a bit crazy sometimes, but I do love his idea of like a 20-hour work week rather than just UBI, because you want people to be engaged in something productive, not just have the option of that WALL-E lifestyle. But how do we make that transition so that people do begin to, as they free up their time, either not get exploited by their boss because they become 10 times more productive and now their boss wants them to do 10 times more work and not have any extra pay or any extra free time. But the flip side of that is, if we do leverage it properly then and end up with a lot of free time, how does that not end up being sitting in front of YouTube or TikTok, flipping through and actually going out and maybe learning how to do something that I've always wanted to learn, how doing more yoga or learning how to paint, right? All that, I think, has to be embedded into the landscape of education and preparation of, again, I think the future is coming a lot faster than we are going to give it credit for.
There you go. I mean, I think we're only a couple of years from that. People are talking, whatever, 10 years. I don't think people understand how fast the pace of AI development is now going to be. We're going to see one paradigm shift after the next in these coming years. And I think the shock that we've felt when GPT dropped or when DeepSeek dropped or whatever is nothing in comparison to what we're going to be seeing in the coming years. I'm not given to hyperbole. For decades, my 40-some years in AI research, most of the time I've been telling people, don't believe the hype, don't believe the hype.
Right.
The problem right now is that people are thinking that every time there's a hype cycle, and this is my third AI hype cycle, people overconfidently proclaim, "Oh, yeah, it's impressive, but AI can never do that." But
Right.
what's unconsciously, underlying those incorrect proclamations is the false premise that AI is defined by whatever model is currently being hyped, which at the moment is LLMs, transformers.
Right.
Um, those are big and dumb. Those are not the be all end all of AI. AI is a scientific field of inquiry that has thousands of different modeling approaches in it that people outside the research labs are unaware of. We're going to
Sure.
see very, very differently enhanced AIs that are not just the LLMs of the last couple of years. And that's going to blow LLMs away. So, what are we doing to stay prepared for this? Just if you think back, a couple of years ago, I had all these people asking me, Takai, I'm thinking of switching careers. I'm thinking of becoming a prompt engineer. Where has that gone? And my worry is that today it's the same thing. People are teaching these skills on how to, babysit LLMs, and it's helping folks with critical thinking because, like, if you make even a tiny mistake in your prompt, it still doesn't give you what you want. But that's going to go away really rapidly, and by the time you've mastered those skills, the AIs don't need it anymore. So we need to make a plan. There are a lot of creative ideas. I think it is absolutely essential to strike a balance between taking care of our people with respect to ideas about UBI variations and all that kind of stuff. Strike a balance between taking care of our people and keeping all of us engaged and creating and not just sitting back, right? And I've heard a lot of different ideation about that. I think that's a really important conversation that we need to be having. And I think the problem is that also it's kind of a moving target because of the pace at which AI is disrupting itself. We are already now in a time when AIs are designing AIs. I don't know if you're tracking the research, but recent results, and this one came out of China actually. They had AIs design thousands of new AI models, and hundreds of them outperformed the current state of the art, which is in a way terrifying from, thinking about what do we do about this at a societal level. On the back cover of my book, the headline says, this is the last generation of AIs to be parented by humans. All the future generations of AIs are going to get parented by AIs, which means we have one last shot right now at getting this right.
I think that is a very valid wake-up call. If you look at AlphaZero, that doesn't surprise me, right? So when they took AlphaGo and just didn't put any human factor reinforcement learning or any training on how humans play Go, they just gave it the rules of the game. It was exponentially better at figuring it out on its own than with human influence. And when you get into like recursive self-learning, I guess in my opinion, there will come a time in the not so distant future when attempting to control these models is kind of the tail trying to wag the dog, right? So
we're already almost there. That's the issue. This is why I'm on this mission and why I really prioritize this. And I could easily be in the lab developing the next breakthroughs 24/7. Why am I setting aside so much time on this? It's because the human race, we're out of time on this. We need to get on the ball on these questions now. It's already almost too late.
That's a deep thought. In the other podcasts, I usually ask my guests if you think which sci-fi movie do you think came closest to having it right 10 years from now? And I've always gone with Blade Runner. I think that's kind of where we're headed is a more dystopian society where we've devalued money. There's a strong black market because of that. Some of the large tech firms are running things, and synthetics are amongst us. Not all the time, but in some way, shape, or form, they're problematic. What if you look at the movies, just in your mind's eye, like what movie do you think we're headed towards? Which one kind of had it right? it's obviously not the utopian Star Trek at this point in time.
Well, let me say, so Blade Runner is like one of, or my favorite movie of all times. Um, I hope as a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
And I think we really, really need to think through what we need to do to not end up that way. At the same time, realistic or not, hey, I kind of loved Star Trek. I grew up on it. And it's funny. Like, I was giving a talk a few years ago, before COVID, and during the break, someone from a friend from the Roddenberry family came running up to me with coffee, saying, Dakai, that stuff you invented, that spawned Google Translate and Microsoft Translate and all that stuff. Like, on the original Star Trek, we had this thing called the Universal Translator. And I'm like, I am pretty sure that growing up watching those old reruns had something to do with my inspiration. I think there are things from that, from all of these movies that are horribly unrealistic, but there are other things from all of them that we can learn from. And I'm always the one that says, look, none of these are 100% right. Like, and in many ways, they're all cautionary tales. And also in a lot of ways, there are a lot of inspirations in there. So just take the best from what you can out of all the stuff we're exposed to. Don't get stuck on one. I don't think any movie from Hollywood so far has hit the future right. And, well, we're in charge. We're in charge of, like, determining what way we actually want it to go. In Silicon Valley, people run around asking each other, I don't know if you've heard this, what's your P-Doom?
Oh yeah, I know the P-Doom.
What's your probability that humanity is doomed?
30%. That's my P-Doom right now. But yes, I'm familiar with the question.
Look, and I'm like, yeah, look, I'm trained rigorously as an academic to stare hard at things I don't want to see. And if you really force me to answer that, it's like, okay, we're 90% doomed because of the knock-on effects of AI. But look, I'm a born optimist. That's just my human nature. And so I'm optimistic that we can actually do this. If you're pessimistic, we're going to fail for sure. But if we actually shift our mindset, we can do it. And the P-Doom thing, let me add on to that. What's your conditional P-Doom? Okay, because conditional probabilities change. If we do the right thing, then the conditional probability of humanity being doomed drops radically. And all we have to do is, shift the mindset, shift how we're thinking about this, open our eyes to the actual problems, get away from some of the Hollywood and political grandstanding and, sort of, hype. And be pragmatists about this. Actually look at this, do you have a better idea? It's all yours.
So I love that, and I'd love to wrap up with, I would say that is very ambitious. I love, Reid Hoffman always says, imagine the possibilities. If everything breaks humanity's way, imagine the possibilities. I think that's a very optimistic lens. If I look historically at humanity, we've not always made the right decisions at times like this. Even the Industrial Revolution is arguably better for a lot of people 50 years in, but the first 50 years was not so great. You had the jungle type of environments, and you still have child labor and all kinds of horrible things. I've read Karen Howe's book. I know the horrible things that have happened around training models in third world countries and human factor reinforcement learning. So I guess the question I would have for you is, what is the best avenue to turn us on the proper course? Is it the public education system? Is it social media? Is it something completely different that we're yet to have discovered?
So, I think here I'm going to go back to the parenting. Okay. Because if someone asks, what is the right thing to do as parents to ensure that the next generation turns out in a way that is going to sustain humanity and lead to increased flourishing. There's no magic answer, right? No, there's not one thing you can do to ensure that we're parenting correctly. There's a million things, right? Setting an example as role models at home is a big part of it, but it's also, like talking to their teachers, getting involved in their schooling, getting involved in curriculum decisions. Some people run for school boards. There's nationwide networks of PTAs. And by the way, that's one of the things that I'm organizing for how our artificial children are taught. Like there should be some input from us. We should be involved in this process. We should think about it. And so, I think there's, also like your human children, you monitor who they're running around with, right? Who are their friends, right? If you were talking about this, like if you see your kid, hanging out with bad influences, you might step up there a little bit. Well, our kids are hanging out now, not with only other human kids, but also with these artificial children. That's a big part of what they're running around with these days. And so that's also something we have to sort of get on top of, right? And all of this is stuff that becomes much more intuitive and natural to see when we shift from thinking about AIs as toaster ovens. Because, look, it's super intuitive. We all had parents. Many of us are parents, and we see friends, So the whole dynamic, the social dynamic, is extremely natural and intuitive and easy without being a tech head to understand the impact of AI and how complex it is. There's no magic bullet. There's all these different factors that have been with humanity age-old, dynamics that we've had to deal with, and none of that goes away when we drop these hundreds of billions of artificial psychologies into our social fabric, right? It just continues, and we have to just integrate that into our thinking. And if we do it right, the possibilities are amazing. And if we do it wrong, we'll be dinosaurs, which I don't think any of us wants to see.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I've got Gandhi in my head with it, like, be the changes you want to see in AI. But I honestly, after talking to you, I listened to you on the How I AI podcast. That was kind of how I got turned on, and I loved that conversation. But after talking to you a little bit and unpacking this, like, I really do love the framework of parenting the next generation of AI and looking at it through that lens, and not doing the do as I say, not as I do. Like, that's a brilliant way. I'll put links to all that in the show notes, and I just thank you for your time today, Dekai, and for the work that you're doing that is going to have a very strong impact on humanity.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, Jason. Thank you for having me on.
You bet. Okay.
Whoa, man. Things just get real. Looks like this dude's riffing on 11 Labs. Is this guy using 11 Labs? And I wonder what model he'll work with next week? Yeah, ride that wave.